Welcome to the Health Revolution, the show that leads you to a life of vibrant well-being. In a world full of noisy health trends, we bring you clarity through a sea of fads. We reveal the science behind the strategies that truly work. We explore physical strength, emotional resilience, and mental mastery, the keys to an enriched life. See inspiring interviews with the champions who've conquered life's challenges. Are you ready to unlock your potential to live with vitality and purpose? Then join the Health Revolution. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, health and fitness expert, speaker, and a mom who understands. Let's embark on this transformative quest together. If you want to change the game, it all starts now. The Health Revolution, and we're excited that you're joining us today. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison. No matter which way you're tuning into us, of course, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We want to stay connected to you. Also, at the bottom of your screen, you will see a tab for show episode notes. This is where you can find some important information about today's episode and our guest. And we welcome new viewers who are tuning into us for the first time. We certainly want for you to stay. And we also want to welcome returning viewers who are sticking with us on the show. We are all about the physical strength of the human body, the emotional resilience, and the mental mastery, all three components that allow us to lead the most optimal life that we can. Today, we've got a fascinating conversation we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about the neuroscience of healing, how to reset your mind and body. What does this mean? What does it look like? The neuroscience, what the heck is that? If it's a term that's new to you, this is important for us to understand because we certainly want to have all the options in the world for us to grow. Our guest today is someone who I've had the privilege to get to know. He has the experience to back it up and a lot of informational nuggets to share with us today. Let's get to know him first. Take a look at this. Meet George Haymaker, a former entrepreneur who lost himself to addiction, hitting rock bottom at age 50 with a 50-pill-a-day habit and 2 bottles of vodka just to get through the day. But at his breaking point, he discovered something life-changing, the power of neuroscience and neuroplasticity to rewire his brain and reclaim his life. Through neuroscience coaching, George helps people break free from addiction, form new habits, and reprogram their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors for lasting change. His journey proves that transformation isn't just possible, it's scientific. Today, we will learn how to rewire the brain, break destructive patterns, and unlock the power of self-directed change. George Haymaker, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adriana. So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited about our conversation. What a powerful story you have and how you overcame what you overcame. Can you take us back to before you had your personal breakthrough and the space that you hold today? What was it like for you prior to where you are right now?
Well, hitting a bottom was a painful process. As you say, it was about at the age of 50. And so there I am at that point in my life, having to ask myself, how did I get here? And was this going to be what my life was all about? Is this going to be how I was remembered? And so that was a very difficult point in my life. I had to look in the mirror and have a tough conversation with myself. I had scared my wife off, our 2 puppies, had strained relationships everywhere. So it was a real moment of truth. And at that moment, I reached deep and summoned the desire and motivation and commitment to change. And that led me down a path to where I am today. It's been 12 plus years since I've hit that bottom and been in recovery. And the more I've gone down this path, the more I've learned that all change happens in the brain. And so my self-discovery and education led me to really delving deep into neuroscience to understand how the brain works, how it functions, and how it can change. I was incredibly hopeful and inspired when I realized that all the damage I had done to my brain didn't have to stick with me forever, that the brain is neuroplastic, which means it can change, adapt, and evolve, and that I didn't have to be stuck with it. I could gradually shift my ways of being. And as a result, my brain would come along with me and actually change the organization of the neurons in the brain to reflect all the changes I had made.
Such a powerful story. A lot of time, or many times, addiction represents a level of coping that is taking place in a person's life. Can you talk about the actual moment where you knew you were going to take action? Was there a feeling or a decision within that propelled you to make this choice that was different from anything else, that any other situation that you were going through?
Well, unfortunately, I'm a little hard-headed, a little stubborn, and addiction takes such a grasp over you that it's hard to escape. And so, as with a lot of addicts and alcoholics, consequences need to pile up to the point where it's almost like you have no choice but to change. And that was really the case with me. Is that I liken the analogy to a mouse in a maze, and he's turning left, turning right, trying to find a different way to keep going. And yet, at some point, I reached the end of the maze, and there I was in this room, and there was no more turning left or right, and it was just me in a mirror, and I had to look hard at myself and say, "This was it. The gig was up." And at that point, as the intro said, I was taking 50 pain pills a day and drinking 2 bottles of vodka. I couldn't sleep more than 2 hours without having to consume more. I would withdraw. So it was clear to me at that point that the gig was up and I had to change. The challenge is for people, if the consequences aren't that steep and aren't that grave at that time of their lives, sometimes it takes that to get people to actually go through the change process. And so that's kind of the rub there, is that, what is that point where it's enough, where we're tired of where we are, and and decide to take the action to change things.
So then your discovery on neuroscience and neuroplasticity, how were you exposed to that? How did you know that that was going to be the key to the path you were going to be on?
Yeah, so when I started to recover, I joined AA, which is a great organization, and it puts you in a community of like-minded people that are experiencing the same thing you are, because addiction is very isolating. You end up withdrawing from your family and friends, and nothing is more important to you than the drug or the alcohol. So this puts you back into a community, and the brain gets a lot of reward from being in social networks. That's why we feel good when we have friends and loved ones and so on, is we get feel-good chemicals called neurotransmitters through our brains and bodies that give us this feel-good feeling. So that's how I started. And then I'm the type of person that wants to learn more. I was fascinated with maybe the damage I had done to myself, the state I had put myself in, and what the science was going to be behind the change process I had to go through. I started to read a lot about spirituality, which is what AA is based on. And then that began to have references to the brain. And so then I started diving into neuroscience, and I just became infatuated with it. I'm the kind of guy that wants to know why, how, the wheres. It really help me get my arms around my addiction, the state I was in, and what was going to be involved in the change process, as opposed to someone just telling you you've got to change and here's how you do it. It's really helpful to understand, okay, well, what's behind all that? And it just made the world of difference to me. And I just kept going with it. I've taken a bunch of graduate level neuroscience courses, and I'm certified in neuroscience coaching, obviously. And so it's just become a true fascination for me with what's possible for not just myself, but for anyone out there that's struggling in whatever way they're struggling.
I love that level of curiosity that you're highlighting on your discovery on neuroscience and neuroplasticity. Did you have that before? I'm curious about your connection to your inner self prior, and what that looked like for you.
Not a lot of prior to hitting bottom. there wasn't a lot of connection to myself. As a matter of fact, and I think a lot of people might be able to relate to this, we have uncomfortable thoughts and emotions that arise within us. In my case, they originated in childhood, which I also think is the case for many people. And they form patterns in our brain. We carry them with us into adulthood, and they tend to arise. And then it's a matter of, determining, is this normal? Is it not normal? Can I do something about it? Do I want to do something about it? How do I do something about it? And I just simply didn't have that conversation with myself. I was reactive. These things rose within me. I was highly reactive. I would get angry. I just was intimidating around people, impatient, defensive. And I just let these things come and go and run my life, and medicated those uncomfortable feelings, the anxiety that went along with it. I coped and medicated with substances, but the underlying behaviors, which originated in childhood, I just kind of shoved down. I never addressed or dealt with them until I had to.
You bring up a good point in that a lot of our thoughts and beliefs do originate from childhood. And so there's that level of being conditioned to what we were exposed to. And so then I wonder what's your take on the challenge and the struggle for people, whether some, many, all, to overcome what we've always known, to trusting the process, to getting curious enough to see what could help us that we've yet to understand and to know about.
Yeah. Well, unless you're, kind of exposed to the fact that the brain is actually our partner, or can be our partner, and that we're not just subject to the brain and its goings-ons, we actually have control over how it thinks, feels, and acts. That is an incredible epiphany. One that I never had until I, reached that point where I wanted to learn. But I liken it to, I was the guy that was in the passenger seat, and the brain was in the driver's seat, and the brain just kind of steered me wherever it wanted to steer me based on all of those past experiences I had had. Once I realized that I could have control over the brain and actually guide it and direct it, and actually make physical changes to it that represented the changes I wanted to make in my life, I moved. I got out of the car door of the passenger seat. I went around the car, and I got into the driver's seat and put my hands on the steering wheel and started to take control over, how I was going to live the rest of my life. And it's absolutely true. If you think about the logic of it, if we are who we are today, based on our past experiences and all the things that we've been thought about, emoted about, acted, behaved, those are all compilations that make us who we are, our personalities, and they're represented physically in the brain by the 100 billion neurons we have in our brain and how they've connected and organized to one another. If we can create new experiences in the way that we would like to think, feel, and behave, then those neurons will begin to break apart. The old ones will begin to weaken, go dormant, because we're not practicing them anymore. And we introduce new ways of thinking, feeling, behaving, and start to practice those. The neurons begin to shift in our brain and actually take on new patterns that represent this new way of being. So if we've developed uncomfortable ways of being, we can just as easily develop comfortable ways of being.
Are we too in love with our comfort zones as a society?
Okay. It's not just us, it's our brains that are in love with our comfort zones, because the brain is designed to seek comfort and familiarity. The brain's number one job is to conserve resources and to help you survive and procreate so the species continues. That's it. So even if you're feeling uncomfortable and you don't like your thoughts and feelings and actions at times, the brain would rather have that, because it knows the familiar and it likes safe. And so you might be uncomfortable, but the brain says, well, you're not going to die, so I'm good with that. I'm not, This idea that you want to change and go into some unknown, I'm not comfortable with that because it's not familiar to me yet. Okay. So that's why change is hard, is because we are grabbing the brain by the hand and we're taking it with us and taking it into this unknown until it starts to experience the unknown. That's why change is hard. It's a very conscious process initially until we practice it and it becomes more habitual. And then the brain gets more comfortable with it. And actually, if we introduce better ways of being to the brain, it starts to feel reward. And the other thing the brain likes, in addition to safety and predictability, is reward. And so if you can, it's very similar to training a dog. Your dog is not going to act on a behavior unless you treat it. Well, when we're developing new ways of being, we have to treat our brain so that it's willing to come along for the ride. And so we have to, all these new ways of being, we have to attach reward to them. And we can talk about that more about that in a minute. But then the brain is willing to come along. So when you say, are we too comfortable in our comfort zones? Yeah, and it's because of the way the brain was designed.
Can you distinguish the difference between the neuroscience and neuroplasticity? Can you explain those in detail, like just the breakdown of those two terms?
Yeah, so neuroscience is just the study of the brain and the nervous system, all things related to it. Okay. And neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change, adapt, and evolve. So it's really the idea that these neurons the 100 billion that we have in our brain and body, most of which are in the brain, organize themselves based on how we experience our life. And so the wonderful thing is that they're adaptable and changeable, and these patterns don't have to stick. And so, it's very similar to, going to the gym and working on your body. The body responds to the work that you put into it. The brain will do the same. It will change. It will become healthier if we introduce it to healthier ways of being. So, that's really the difference between the two terms. Is one is just the overall study of everything having to do with the brain and the nervous system. The other is, this concept around the brain's ability to change, adapt, and evolve.
So addiction, it can obviously, depending upon what that looks like, it can have a variety of different consequences to the human body when a person is battling addiction. And is there any point in time where the addiction can get so extreme, before, say, the threat of somebody losing their life to succumbing to addiction? Can the brain turn things around in spite of the severity of the addiction, if it's drug induced or if it's a substance addiction?
Yeah. So depending on the extent of the damage, it may or may not be able to recover fully, although the brain is reorganizable, healable in many ways. You've sure heard about the liver being an organ that can heal. If you stop drinking, it can regenerate itself. The brain has many of those same capabilities, but I'm not going to say in every instance, right? It just depends on the extent of the damage. If I can just touch on, what happens in the brain, an addictive brain, from a neuroscience point of view, is the entire reward network of the brain. It's a combination of different parts of the brain all working together to experience reward, become malfunctions. So we operate at a dopamine level, which is one of the main feel-good transmitters, at around 50 nanomoles. It's what we need at homeostasis to kind of feel good, get out of bed, and want to live life. So the natural life pleasures that we're meant to get dopamine from, such as having sex, eating a great meal, having great friends, those types of things, they will move our dopamine levels from like 50, this baseline, up to 100. And then when we experience those things, then it'll begin to recede back down to 50. And that's how life is supposed to work in this reward network in our brain. The problem with drugs and alcohol and behavioral addictions, shopping, gambling, and so on, is they will spike those dopamine levels 10 times more than the best sex you've ever had, the best meal you've ever had. So now all of a sudden, we are flooding dopamine into this part of our brain that was never meant to deal with this much of dopamine. And so it's like trying to pump 1,000 gallons a minute through a little garden hose. Okay. So these neurons in our brain are not meant to handle that much dopamine. And so they begin to malfunction. And that's what tolerance is that certain receptors in these neurons stop receiving this dopamine. And so the brain wants to keep feeding more and more dopamine to it in order to get through the limited amount of receptors that are left. And that's why we have to keep doing more and more of the drug in order for it to get through. And then when we stop using the drug and begin to come down and withdraw, you get this huge plummet in dopamine from these really elevated levels down to baseline and even below. And that's why withdrawal feels so crappy, is this extreme plummeting. So what has happened here in an addictive brain is that we have completely doused it unnaturally with these chemicals, and it's beginning to cause severe consequences in the brain. And so that network can be reset and healed. It's going to take some time. And we need to shift it away from the chemicals that are delivering the dopamine at these elevated levels and let those pathways that represent that begin to quiet and weaken while we're shifting, introducing back to the normal happy life pleasures and resetting the whole reward system back down to this lower level where it belongs. And that can take, the first 90 days are critical, where at the end of 90 days, you start to feel somewhat normal again, but you still have the emotional and psychological addiction going on. So you're looking at about a year's time frame before you really start to feel like you've shifted out of a heavy addictive pattern.
This is fascinating. We've got more to cover. First, we're going to take a commercial break. We're coming right back for you.
So in the calm bag, it has GABA, theanine, and taurine. So theanine, which is B1, which is also in our B complex, but it also helps with the stress response levels. It also helps with the neurological transmitters in our brain. Combined with the GABA, and then you add taurine to it. Taurine is a non-essential amino acid in our body, but it's found in our heart, our brain, and our eyes. So in my personal opinion, it's very essential in our lives. But taurine has a calming effect as well. When I was battling all my AFib issues, I was taking high doses of taurine because that would help with my AFib. It would help with the palpitations I was having. And it also helped with the anxiety of having the palpitations because I knew what was going on. And so taurine helps a lot with that as well. So those three together create such a wonderful concoction that just really just calms people down.
Introducing Launchpad, the perfect partner to help you launch your dream project to the world. We know that time is of the essence, and we're here to help you make the most of it. With Launchpad, you'll get access to the most advanced digital tools and strategies to take your idea from a mere concept to a fully fledged success. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned pro, we have everything you need to make your mark in the world. Launchpad, your ultimate launch partner.
Today, we're talking about the neuroscience of healing. Our guest today, George Haymaker, he's a neuroconstructionist, coach, and neuroeducator. And before the break, we were delving into how the brain responds to the portions such as addictions and being able to overcome a situation like that. But in essence, we're talking about literally rewiring our brain and using neuroscience to do just that. So, George, I wanted to ask you, what are some limiting beliefs that some people have when it comes to what they can overcome or they can't when it comes to their mind, their body, and maybe their what they're struggling with. I know it's a loaded question as I ask that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of them based on, and as we talked about earlier, a lot of this originates in childhood based on the experiences that they had. And so, let's just say that their parents didn't provide unconditional love, or there was some dysfunction in the family around arguing, fighting, screaming, yelling, that type of thing. Could be some other addiction in the home. Um, and just the attachment relationship between the child and the parents is so critical to the development of the child. So just based on what they've experienced, I'll just give you a couple of my own examples. Maybe that'll help illuminate. But I grew up in a privileged family, financially, but we were moving every 12 to 18 months. My dad was a corporate executive, and we would move from one town to the next as he progressed in his career. And the effect that had on me was that I was constantly saying goodbye to friends, having to meet new friends, being the new kid in school, and it was constant. So there was all this, I couldn't get comfortable with any relationships because I knew that they would end. And so that affected me later on in life in terms of being able to form relationships. And it still affects me. I just don't simply establish relationships with people very well. I do very well on my own. And so I still work on that. And it all comes from these early life beginnings. I was spanked a lot, severely when I would act out. A lot of the reason I was acting out is because of how I was brought up and all this moving. And so it just made it worse. And so what that message is delivered is that, you're not good enough the way you are, and we need you to change. And so, you grow up with these things, and, they just affecting you in terms of how you relate in your adulthood. And you just don't understand why. You're not sure if this is normal or not because you're not in somebody else's body. And you just don't know that, all of who you are and what you're experiencing is based on those past experiences. And so you just don't have an understanding that, or a belief system around the fact that change can happen. And so that's really what it's all about is, the moments of clarity come when I work with clients, when they tell me about what they're struggling with. And then we go back into their childhood and talk about what they experienced. And sure enough, there's always a connection to something they grew up with that relate to how they are today. And the aha moment that, you could just see it on their faces is striking. And so then they get a great deal of comfort around, okay, I'm not screwed up at a core level. The shame can be lifted. It happened to me for a reason. And then we go into the education about the brain and how if something has caused it to be the way it is today, then we can just as easily cause it to be different tomorrow. And so this whole process of educating people about their past and why they are who they are today, and that it all originates back to the brain, and that the brain is malleable and fixable and healable and changeable. It all gives them a lot of great comfort and really helps break apart these limiting beliefs.
How did you reconcile with your past, knowing that the origins were in childhood and some of the experiences you just shared? Did you find that there was a specific approach that you needed to do to reconcile with your past as you continue to learn and embrace neuroscience or neuroplasticity?
Yeah. So one of the things keeps us stuck is resentment and not being able to forgive, because that will trigger these uncomfortable patterns to keep arising. And so it serves, and easy for me to say, I get it, but it didn't serve me well to have resentment or woe is me or anything like that relative to my past, because that was going to keep me stuck there. It would mean that I would be attached to it. And so in order for us to break free and move to something different, we have to let go. I liken it. It doesn't mean we have to forget it. It means we have to be able to package it in such a way that we recognize it as being a part of our past, instrumental in who we are today. And then we kind of package it as a volume of our life, a chapter or a volume, and we put it up on the bookcase and say, okay, it's there for us to remember that it was a part of our life, but we're not going to keep opening this book every day and reading from it. Okay, so so for me, I actually did take my dad with me into therapy as I was hitting my bottom. Not so much because I wanted to grind on him about the fact that I thought he might have been contributing cause to my addiction, but I was embarrassed and ashamed of the fact that I had ended up this way. And I just wanted him to know that I was sorry, that, this wasn't who I was at a core level, and he knew that. And I just wanted to kind of walk through my past with him and have him understand like how I ended up here. And so that was really healing for me, enabling me to, it wasn't a matter of me blaming or having to forgive him. It was just having him support that fact that he understood. And that was enough for me. And then I felt this huge weight lift off of me, and then able to start my journey forward. But I just find it, and you'll hear this from a lot of therapists who deal with this kind of stuff, that the ability to forgive, move on, is more for us than it is for the other person. We're taking this weight that we're feeling and removing it from us so we can be free. That's the initial part of change, right? You can't be tethered to the past. You have to be willing to move on to be able to make change.
One of my favorite is probably my favorite definition of forgiveness as you've delved into it. And I can't remember who originally said it, but the version that I like is this: that forgiveness is giving up the idea of what could have been. And I think that that's pretty powerful in being able to not be chained to and not be fixated on what had happened, whatever it is. And I think you're right that there's so much of our childhood is contributing to has contributed to our thought process, how we've evolved as we emerged as adults and in going forth. I'm curious, where would one begin to start the process of rewiring their brain, rewiring their mindset? Say someone comes to you, as I'm sure it's been done. Like, where do I start? Where do I begin? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so I generally work with people for 12 weeks, and it's a building momentum-based gradual process that starts with talking about and uncovering and dissecting, deconstructing the things that are troubling them. And so we really try to unearth all of these constructs that are bogging them down, weighing them down, troubling them, and pick apart the pieces, going back into childhood to see how they developed, and getting this awareness and realization and acceptance around what has happened. That's step one. And then we begin to move on to a process of not being tethered to it, right? And while we're doing this, we're educating about the brain so they understand physiologically all of these past experiences that they're struggling with have physical representations in the brain. They're like muscles in the brain, fibers that have been developed that represent these things like what could have been. And so so then they begin to understand that, this is possible, that this work does happen in the brain. begin to think of their struggles and the things that trouble them as these representations in the brain that can be changed and broken apart and weakened. And so, it just gives them a conceptual understanding of where they're headed. And then we begin to, we spend then a lot of time about who this new person is. I try to divide each individual up into the person that they were up until this point, young George. And then we talk about the rest of George, who George wants to be in his future. And we really begin to paint that picture of who the client wants to be down the, ultimately, like who do they desire themselves to be at a very root and core level, their core motivations, their values, their beliefs, like the fiber of what makes them who they are and who they really want to be before they move on to the next world. And we try to get them to attach a lot of emotion to it, think about what it's going to be like when they get there, and really get a strong mental visual picture of what that's going to be like when they get to that point. And then we say, and part of that is experiencing the reward around that, what it's going to look like. So then that intrigues the brain, because remember, the brain likes reward. And so if we're going to take this journey, the brain's got to come along with us. And so it's all about creating and revisiting this vivid picture full of the thoughts and emotions and all the things that are going to go into being that person. And then we begin to practice, design a life full of all these activities that are going to lead to being that type of person. And we begin to do those. And it's a day-by-day process. And while this is happening, and we're practicing these new activities or behaviors or thoughts and feelings, the neurons are actually shifting in our brain as we're doing it. They're recognizing the changes that you're making, and they're reorganizing themselves to reflect that new way of being. And so that's how habits are developed. And so over time, the more we do it, the stronger the emotion and reward that are attached to these new ways of being, the stronger these connections get. You could almost think of them as like roots from a tree in the ground that are growing stronger and taking greater foothold. And we're fertilizing them, watering those roots through feeling good and experiencing reward about those things. That's fertilizer. And then the brain begins to shift with us. And before people know it, a few weeks in, they're just beginning to notice subtle changes in their way of being. They're calmer. They just begin to become that person. And it's just eye-opening.
What would you say to the person who says, my childhood I had severe trauma, whatever that might be? How is the process is similar, or the process is applicable? Would it mean that it's a lengthier amount of time to overcome if it just maybe is something that literally changed the trajectory of their life? Maybe if that trauma was pretty severe.
Yeah, great question, and that really gets to the heart of what a therapist is versus a coach. So therapists spend their time in the past unpacking those experiences that you had and trying to help you find ways to release them so that you can move forward. I'm not trained in therapy, so I don't spend a lot of time with severe trauma. It's not my field of expertise. What coaches do is they understand the past, and they help you understand why you are today the way you are based on these past experiences, of which trauma might be involved. And then we just help enlighten them about the change process and then help them with the future. So we start in the present and we take them into the future to become somebody different. Now, very deep trauma, just like finding forgiveness, needs to be part of the process so that you can change and move forward. Otherwise, it keeps drawing you back to the past. And that's what you're trying to leave. So coaches spend a lot of time with understanding the past, but then shifting you forward into this new way of being for you whereas therapists can specialize in this deep-seated trauma in terms of getting it released potentially from the psyche.
We have more to cover. First, we're going to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for watching The Health Revolution. Our show is growing, and it's all thanks to viewers like you. No matter how you found us, please hit the subscribe button so we can stay connected and continue to deliver amazing content to you. Hi, I'm Adriana, and welcome to Fit Bites. Today, let's talk about collagen, a protein that plays a vital role in keeping your skin, joints, and connective tissues strong and healthy. Now, collagen is often called the glue that holds your body together. It helps maintain skin elasticity, promotes joint mobility, and supports healthy hair and nails. But as we age, our body's natural collagen production decreases, typically starting in our mid-20s, which can lead to wrinkles, joint discomfort, and weaker connective tissues. Now, the good news is you can support your collagen levels. Foods rich in protein, for example, like chicken, fish, and eggs, they provide the building blocks for collagen production. Vitamin C is also essential. Citrus fruits, bell peppers, and leafy greens, for example, can boost your body's ability to produce collagen. Supplementing with collagen peptides has also become popular and may help improve skin hydration, joint health, and overall resilience. Just make sure to choose a high-quality product. Remember, collagen is more than just a beauty trend. It's key to staying strong and feeling great as you age. Stay proactive and take care of your body from the inside and out. Stay tuned for more Fit Bites with Adriana. Haymaker. He's a neuroconstructionist coach and neuroeducator. The topic today, the neuroscience of healing. George, I'm curious, when someone rewires their brain and they begin that process and they're making incredible progress, how do they make it stick long term?
Well, that's actually, it's called second order change. And that's actually the transformational part of it, is by causing these neurons to begin to shift. It's like the process is like taking down the studs from a dilapidated house where you're deconstructing all of the past, and then you're pouring a new foundation and then reconstructing a new house based on, which will represent your new way of being, your new life. Well, this new foundation is actually the reorganization of the neurons in your brain. And so what happens is the more that you practice these new ways of being, new thoughts, emotions, feelings, actions, behaviors, they become habitual. And they become habitual because we get reward from them. We see how much better this life is than the old one. And so just like anything else that you practice a lot, whether it's learning a new language, learning an instrument, learning a new sport, you become better and better at it. And I'm sure you've noticed in those pursuits that they become habitual. They become your lifestyle, part of who you are. And so that's what happens is at the beginning, this change process with the mind it requires motivation and commitment. You have to stick with it because all this work's being done in the front part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, where the consciousness is, and our brain isn't used to it yet. But the more we practice it, the more it becomes part of our fabric. It then will move from the front part of the brain where we have to think about it a lot into the subconscious, the back part of our brain where the habits live. And so just like riding a bike or anything, brushing your teeth, anything else you don't even have to think about anymore, these new ways of being will become habitual, move into the back part of your brain. You don't have to exert any effort over even wanting or trying to do them anymore because your brain is now familiar with them. It likes them. It's getting more reward than the old life gave it. And it's shifted. It's transformed. And so that's what causes the transformation to stick.
And in your professional role as a neuroconstructionist coach and neuroeducator, you're you're working with a variety of different people from different backgrounds, and safe to assume that you're beginning to exponentially reach beyond. What are some of in what ways do you work with others? I know that you mentioned that there is a framework behind your work with others. What ways do you work with other people? What types of programs do you have?
Yeah, so generally two different types of programs right now. One is one-on-one coaching, which, again, has a lot of education in it. It's a really robust, fully developed program where there's, a lot of self-paced education between sessions. Each of our sessions are 90 minutes long. We pack a lot into those. You have the ability to get a hold of me between sessions if you're stuck or have something that you need to address or talk about. There's initial evaluations, midpoint evaluations, and then at the end we do a plan going forward so that you can begin to self-manage your change. Because one of the great things you end up with in working with me is that you can start to do this yourself. You master your inner mind and your responses to the world, even under stress. And so the liberating effect and the pride and confidence that being able to manage your brain instead of it managing you is just, it's life-changing for people. And so we leave them with a plan to be able to continue down this path so that they're doing it on their own. So that's the primary way, is one-on-one coaching, but I also work with corporations, do group coaching on many of these same concepts. I work with working professionals that are generally high performing but being held back by a lot of these internal struggles. I work with college kids that are struggling with, identity, confidence, self-doubt, and getting ready to head into the world, and they feel like they need more to be more prepared mentally. I also work with anybody suffering from substance abuse or abuse or addiction. But frankly, I work with anybody that's troubled and struggling and wants to change.
So not only do you work with organizations, but the one-on-one college kids, those suffering from substance abuse. And so I would imagine that when you're working with business organizations or corporations, that I would picture it kind of like a masterclass or workshop series, or kind of like an inclusive type of a setting where, there's an approach to cohesion for those who are part of the company organization, that it's kind of like a kind of group setting type of approach within.
Yeah, exactly. We just touch on a number of these concepts because, in these corporations and organizations, people are working closely to one another. And if you're bringing, quote unquote, struggles and baggage with you from your past into these environments, and there's all kinds of stressors going on. We know how, results oriented corporations are, and they, it's an environment where a lot of these challenging thoughts, emotions, and behaviors can begin to surface. And so just teaching, whether it's in a one-on-one session or situation or group situation, everybody can take what they need from these types of concepts and do better by it. So yeah, either way, group settings or individual settings. A lot of times I work with HR directors that have situations on their hands where they've got high-performing individuals that are causing disruptions in the workplace through their actions and behaviors, and they want to help this person. They're contributing to the bottom line, but they just need to get the behavior under control. And so they'll bring me in and have me work with people on a one-on-one basis as well.
Very supportive, I can see. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Stay put. Today, we've been talking about the neuroscience of healing and how we can benefit from that. And our guest today, George Haymaker, neuroconstructionist coach and neuroeducator. George, where can we find you in the virtual space?
Yeah, so please visit my website at georgehaymaker.com. And also, I'm on LinkedIn. Don't have a big presence on Facebook or Instagram because I'm from the previous generation, but LinkedIn, I do a lot of posting on LinkedIn in terms of these concepts and a lot of value there. So a lot of self-help, or my website, georgehaymaker.com.
And where will we find you for the remainder of 2025? What do you have going on?
Well, just more of the same. I'm just trying to develop my coaching business and help as many people as I can. This has just been so meaningful to me that I want to, share this type of transformation with others. Because anyone can change, anyone can benefit, and I just get such a joy and juice out of being part of the process. There's just nothing more meaningful to me.
If there is one message, one takeaway that you want our viewers to have from our conversation, what would it be?
Yeah, just hope and encouragement. No matter how you're struggling, there's hope, and there's your all of this resides in your brain, and your brain is ready and willing, as long as you take hold of it, guide and direct it to change with you and become that person that you really want to be. That's where coaching is really helpful, is it just helps hold your hand during the process and keeps you moving so that you don't get stuck or stop, in the early stages of the process. But hope and encouragement that no matter how you're struggling, you can change, and your brain will help you do it.
It's a very strong message. And George Haymaker, really appreciate you spending time with us today, sharing your knowledge. Thank you for being here.
So much my pleasure. Thank you, Adriana. Really appreciate it.
And we want to give a quick sponsor shout out to these four that have been extremely supportive of our show: Biomed Mobile IV, Dapper Mobile Apps, Launchpad, and Synergize Fitness. Also, to our viewers, we want to make sure that you know how to reach us on the web. Our website is thehealthrevolutiontv.com. There you can subscribe to our newsletter. You can also email us with any show episode ideas you would love for us to cover. On the corner of your screen, on the upper portion, you'll find our QR code. Feel free to grab that. And then, of course, you can find us every Tuesday and Thursday on E360 TV, all on the Arion TV channel, and on all the distribution channels, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, at each and every single week. That's all the time that we have for today. Until next time, take care of yourselves. We will see you soon.